Real quick before we get into this video, as I was editing it, I realized that I had plenty of footage for the 5 tips that I put together originally when I first decided to record this. So if you want to see those tips, make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to include them after I give you some of my personal advice. Also, make sure to hit that like button. It'll help me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm and it'll let YouTube know to get this video out to more people. All right, let's get going. I wanted to give beginners who were interested in learning how to code a bit of advice in this video, and I started off by writing down different tips that I could give you. I figured 5 generic tips wouldn't be as helpful as giving you personal advice from my perspective as someone who actually went through the whole process of learning how to code. I wasted a bunch of time early on because I didn't know what I was doing and I was just trying to figure things out on my own. And then I jumped around between programming languages and did stuff like that that also wasted time, and I was scared to start writing code because I felt like I didn't know enough, and I would just sit there and keep reading or watching the same tutorials or watching different videos, and I was just too scared of not knowing how to do it to actually even try to do it. I know a lot of people go through it. Somebody actually commented on it recently. You sit on your laptop and the screen is just blank on your text editor. You don't know what to write. All the studying that you've been doing feels like it's just been wasted and you feel like you don't know anything. And I've gone through all those feelings. I know exactly where you're at right now. Sticking with it is the first thing. There's going to be a lot of times when you're self-taught and you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna feel like it's not worth it. You're gonna feel like it's pretty much impossible, that you're dumb, that you're not cut out for it, that it's just not something that you should be doing, and you're gonna probably drop it and move on to something else. Harsh reality of becoming a self-taught programmer is that most people don't accomplish it. But if you just stick with it, you'd be amazed how far you can get after a few months of just working through all the problems and trying to understand everything that you're learning and everything that you're trying to take in. Just stick with it. If you don't continue to show up every day, if you're not dedicated to learning, if you're not disciplined enough to do it on your own, I've made videos talking about motivation. I've shared my story to motivate people. But that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you don't keep up and do it all the time, every day, or as much as you can, eventually you're just probably going to let it fall to the wayside. But if you really want to accomplish like getting a job or building an app or whatever it is you want to do with programming, then try to actually get there. My goal was to get a job and I was able to do that. And it took me almost a year. I tell people that all the time because there's so many people on YouTube that tell you, oh, they did it in 3 months. And then you feel like you don't get it done in 3 months and you're a failure. You see all these people that kind of humble brag or straight up brag about how fast they do it and how fast they were able to get a job and become a programmer and whatnot. And the truth is that's not the normal. That's the exception. The normal is it takes a long time and you gotta stick with it or you won't get there. Another piece of advice that I'm gonna give is that it's okay to feel like you're lost. When I first started, I had no direction and I fumbled around for a few months until I figured out my path and found the learning resources that I liked and found the way that I like to learn, because some people don't like books and they prefer videos, and some people don't like videos, they prefer books, and everybody learns differently. Eventually, you'll find your groove. You need to give it some time for you to get comfortable with learning on your own. Most of us aren't used to teaching ourselves things, and most of us are used to a school setting, and when you go self-taught, you don't have any of that structure, and there's a lot of time that feels wasted early on when you're learning how to code, and it's okay to have that lack of direction. It's not a complete waste, because I know a lot of that time that I feel like I wasted, I probably learned a lot of things, but obviously it would have been better spent had I had direction and would have focused on specific things rather than moved around so much when I first started learning and having a hard time figuring out what path I wanted to take, and if I wanted to do web dev or if I wanted to do mobile development or if I wanted to be a game developer, and all these different things would take me on different paths of research where I could have used that time studying rather than researching what I should learn. But if you don't know what path you want to take early on, then Obviously, you're going to have to find your own direction, and once you do that, you'll get traction, and then you'll start learning when you know what you should be learning. And the last bit of advice that I would have to give people here is don't be so hard on yourself. I remember that I was very hard on myself. I struggle with this a lot, and I would beat myself up when I wouldn't understand stuff, and I would feel stupid because this is stuff for smart people, and this is stuff that regular people aren't supposed to learn easily, and even smart people struggle with learning this stuff. And I would just get frustrated that I didn't go to school, and I would just get frustrated that I wasn't good at math, and I would get frustrated when there was big words that I didn't understand in the YouTube videos and I'd have to go Google them. All of that has made me better. All of that has taught me a lot. All of that has brought me to where I'm at now. I've been working as a software developer for 4 years, and it's pretty crazy when I think about it, coming from my circumstances and how I was raised, and the fact that I don't have a high school diploma and I got a GED and I'm actually a dropout and I never went to college and I didn't do any of the things that most people do to get to where I'm at. And I'm still being hard on myself. There's still times when I struggle with imposter syndrome. There's still times when I realize that I didn't do something that I could have done that was easy, and somebody points it out in code review, and I'm hard on myself because how did I not realize I could have done it that way? And I should have known that because I'm a better developer than that. And I struggle with a lot of stuff still. And I try not to be hard on myself, but that's just something that I personally struggle with, apart from, being hard on myself in coding and software development. I'm also just hard on myself in general. It's a bad trait that I have, but I know that a lot of people who are learning how to code are extremely harsh on their own work. They are scared to show people what they build. Sometimes they're intimidated by other developers because they feel like they don't know enough, and at the end of the day, it's just you beating yourself up. You're learning, and people understand that. And when you're a beginner and you're trying to learn how to code, there's a lot of things that may or may not click, and a lot of things that may make you feel like you're kind of dumb. And that's okay. Just don't beat yourself up over it. All right, so those 5 tips that I originally jotted down for this video: take your time and don't try to learn everything at once. I struggled with that a lot. You get information overload when you first start learning how to code. There's so much stuff to learn. I've been doing it for 4 years and I'm still learning stuff almost every day. I learned something new. So take your time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You're going to be at this for a while. You're going to be learning stuff all the time. Don't try to learn everything at once. There's no way that you can, and all it's going to do is stress you out. The next tip I had jotted down out of the 5 tips that I was going to mention in this video were: figure out a path and stick with it when you're first getting started as a beginner. I didn't know what path I wanted to take. I mentioned it earlier. I looked into mobile development, web development, game development, all types of stuff, and I eventually gravitated towards web development because that's what I found to probably be the easiest way for me to get in. But a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people want to get into game development, but they feel that web development or front-end development's a little bit easier, so they go in with the mindset of like, oh, I'll learn that and I'll get a job as a web developer and then I'll learn game development and make a shift. Trust me, that shift would be a lot harder for you once you're established as a web developer. Focus as a junior game developer and work on that, and then try to get your first job as a game developer if that's the path you want to take. Side note, game developers, probably not a good bit of advice because I've heard a lot of game developers are actually overworked and underpaid. So maybe not game development. Look into that before you do that. All right, so the third tip is going to be start writing code ASAP. This is something that everyone struggles with, and if there is one piece of advice that you take from this list, that would be the one bit of advice that I recommend everyone do. Start writing code immediately. Don't wait to write code. Follow along with your tutorials, follow what they're doing, but try to write your own code as soon as possible. If you struggle with it, Google every single question that you have, and everything that you can't remember, Google it and research it, because that's what I do on a regular basis as a professional developer. Focus on the concepts, not the syntax. Everybody gets hung up on the syntax. Honestly, many programming languages are very, very similar to one another, and learning syntax nuances is a waste of time when you're first learning how to code. If you're able to pick a programming language and you stick with that programming language, then you only have one syntax to worry about. Focus on basic programming language concepts first, such as conditionals, if-else statements, what variables are, what types are, what while loops are, for loops are, how to implement them. Focus on those things and don't focus on the syntax so much. Concepts are transferable between all languages. Last bit of advice, if you've done 3 tutorials and you haven't built anything, you're probably in tutorial hell. You should at least build the project or try to complete the project that you do in a tutorial, and then try to go and reverse engineer it or change things on it or build your own version of it or move on to something else that's gonna have you building something and writing code. Do not keep doing tutorials and just keep completing those projects that are on the tutorials. You have to eventually start writing code. And if you're on your 3rd tutorial and you're getting ready to purchase your next Udemy course or start your next tutorial and you haven't built anything yet, you're in tutorial hell. Get out while you can. Start writing code right away, like I mentioned earlier. That's it. That's all I got. Those were a few generic tips that I was going to make this video on. The advice that I gave earlier was real advice that I wish that someone would have shared with me, and that's personal on my level, and I hope it was helpful. If you did find it helpful, make sure you like this video. If you want to see more videos on me talking about learning how to code and becoming a self-taught programmer, make sure you subscribe to my channel and check out some more of my other content. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.